Now, before I go into Q&A, I've got to address something because it's becoming a bit of an issue. And it's nothing personal against anyone in particular or any number of you. I'm asking all of you to consider what questions you're actually asking. Because I don't think some of you realise the dangers that you put people in with your questions. That also has the potential of ruining plans that have been made or worked on for quite some time. You know, I know you all want to know the ins and outs of everything. I get that. I've been where you are before 2013, so I do get it. But you have to consider the safety of the people involved over the need to know every little detail. Yet again this week, one of our team was poisoned with fentanyl. He did survive. And this is the 5th or 6th attempt at poisoning one of our group this year alone. This is war, in case you haven't noticed. And people really need to grasp that fact. I know the psyche tells you war means planes flying overhead and dropping bombs and missiles flying here and guns going off and tanks. This is a completely different war. Now, you do get told on this show way more details than any other show on the internet. That is a fact. But you also have to be a lot more responsible with your questions than some of you are currently exhibiting. We've got agents scattered on both the Facebook and the MeWe pages. Yes, we know who you are, long before you out yourself. Who are there currently causing disruption and distraction. But questions of wanting to know who is working with who, plans on this and plans on that, and how will you fix this and what are your plans to fix that? They're not good questions. Revealing plans or operations during war is pure folly. And people really need to get a grasp of that. So if you ask for the plans to be made available and I answer, am I not telling the cabal our plans as well? Is X working with Y? Me saying yes, X works with Y is going to be of what benefit to the person who asked that question? What have you gained from knowing that answer? Have you considered what if the clowns find out X does work with Y and they block those two working, or kill one, or kill both of them? Was the answer, that answer, really worth it? This is where I'm coming from. Do I like or approve of this or that alt media? Is not really helping either. The fact you ask the question means you don't trust them, not me. But you're asking me to validate it. But why do you need me to validate what you already suspect or already know? Plus, what happens if I turn around and say, those people are working with a faction? Some people get pissy over that. I will have another piece on faction alt media later. And all it does is adds another group of clowns to come onto the pages and play divide and conquer. We have enough clowns already coming from the Cosmic Voice group, the Neil Keenan group, the Tank, Orb Tellers, Lily Earthling, Wilcock and Corey groups coming on the pages and also in private and creating mayhem without adding more to it. I go through every question that is sent eventually, but sometimes I can't answer. But by me not answering or saying, no comment. That can also provide info to those that pry on us. A non-answer can be just as telling as giving the answer. So I'm asking you all to think more sensibly about what you are asking and what are the implications of me answering that question or not. Like I said, this is war. You have to recognise this, and asking questions like that I've just stated is potentially putting me and many others at risk. I put out a lot of information and as many details as possible when it's safe to do so. But asking me publicly to go deeper is at times putting things at risk. What I can assure you, nothing ever gets held back, we're not Cosmic Voice, from you the listener, except where I exert responsibility for that information that puts people at risk or potentially ruins plans. It is that aspect only that gets held back until those plans, people or issues are deemed safe to do so. So there's a load of questions here. Some of them are part of what I've just addressed, and I'm asking those people to think more on what you're questioning. What value are you going to get? Is it putting people at risk? Is it putting plans at risk? When I was 5, somehow I knew not everyone would make it to the next level of consciousness. 33 years later, on my internal stuff, I'm facing this painful knowledge again. Is there anything you may know of how to help ease or reconcile the knowledge from my mind to ease the pain in my heart? Not really. You know, everyone is saved in the end, some sooner than others. You know, nobody. There's a lot of people here, and the majority sadly, who are just not ready to advance to the next level. They're just not, for a variety of reasons. Some of it their own, some of it external interference. But there's also sufficient numbers who are. They were the same numbers pretty much who were ready 65,000 years ago and were blocked by the loops. This time it's going to be different. You know, I explained in a show, was it 3 or 4 months ago? In fact, no, it's longer. It's the February show. You're all going to die. That show. Yeah. Of my understanding how things will play out. I think it was the February 22nd show, if you want to go and check it out. So no one is not saved. It's just that some will advance and the majority won't at this time. One year has passed since the disappearance of the Argentine sub. The families of those on board are still waiting for answers. Is there any intel or information? I meant to ask about this today, but we were sidetracked with sadly more pressing matters. Maybe I can ask again next week and see if I can get some details. I would like to help. I've been seeking truth most of my life, always aware that something's dreadfully wrong. I've wondered if maybe the human race was destined to fail this test. They thought so. They were wrong. As it appears to be too few that will fight. They're the ones that are not ready, is why. But that's not a good enough reason to quit for me. My life has been stolen from me because of actions of psycho clowns only on a smaller, more personal level. I've also been stripped of my life as well, repeatedly. Nobody around me has any desire to participate in being part of the resistance of this madness we are faced with. Not even a few family members who are partially awake care one bit. Only obsessed with sports, personal gain and carnality. This is a common theme for probably all of us that listen to this show. And as it stands now, there's a lot of people in anxiety mode who have personal doubts of the self and the information garnered, a worry and irrational fears that linger in the background but you don't know what for, a general heaviness on the shoulders and throughout the torso, relationship issues resurfacing, people acting and being strange or aggressive. There's a general irritance and less tolerance of people not getting it or you perceive as playing games at the moment. Now these are all surfacing now and are sending many off balance. And it's the frequency echo of the chaos, not ours, theirs. And we have to learn to ride the waves. This is a down wave at the moment. It won't last long. Now the 45-55 scale does work. Calm and balanced. Now all of you have developed these skills over the last few years. Learn to trust in them and use them to maximum effect on what is currently a negative vibe wave. There's a lot of turmoil around the world. There's a lot of people who are losing it because they're learning the truth for the first time and are not handling it too well. We knew this was coming. And at first people go into reaction mode. What we don't need is our own members and our own listeners then having their own personal doubts about themselves and any information garnered where they feel it's more comfortable to step back in the box. You can't. Once out, you can't go back in. Garner the strength and push forward. Members are there to support you. I believe many new members, me included, would appreciate learning more about the Universal Council, its history, its membership, disclosure, and something about how the peace treaty was negotiated on behalf of humanity. And all the information on that, all the safe information anyway, that was allowed to be put out surrounding that has already been disclosed in many previous shows, and it is available in the archive section on the Think Different site and also on the transcripts on my Patreon site. Now, when time is right and safe to do so, we will reveal more details, but perhaps listen to the November 15th show recently, and in particular a piece of what Kim and I are already involved in that has been released. Now there are other things that we are working on that haven't been released yet, and then perhaps people will really understand the depth of what we already do. You know, it takes a lot just doing this show without all the rest, you know, and our workload has increased. And yes, we would love to do special shows and more in-depth stuff, but there's so much going on at the moment that are far more important than radio shows. If Kim can shut down servers, can she not turn off a space-based weather satellite. Me. Possibly. But then I'll ask, why can't you do it? I can hear people now going, how can we do that? Use your abilities. There are plenty of people with abilities in our own group. There's some in others. So instead of asking Kim and I to essentially run and do everything, why not attempt to interfere with them yourself? It's not a criticism. It is a suggestion. It's a fairly valid question, but is it not, again, asking somebody else to do something for you? Now, there has been interference with satellites. We've reported it in these shows. But why is it always one or two people who think, I'll go and do that? Why doesn't everyone think that way? We're no different to any of you. Lots of people have lots of abilities, but they just get on with life and then ask others to go and fix it. We have the capability of fixing it ourselves. Something to consider. In light of Marduk's removal through the peace treaty, would it not be equally prudent to negotiate the removal of those nefarious elements who continue to hold humanity and its governments hostage with their sinister intentions, criminal actions and plans? Not really, because there's a free will element, and as we've said many times in previous shows, if it's a human versus human problem, then humans have to deal with it. There's many questions tonight, people asking the UPU to fix this and this one to fix that, and the council to do this, and why can't we fix it? Why can't we fix that hospital that's telling doctors and nurses and the staff that they're going to get vaccinated when they don't want to? Do we need the UPU or the council to fix that? No. We have to take responsibility. This is what this is all about. Us being responsible for ourselves, us taking care of ourselves, us defending ourselves and looking after each other. So, or you've heard what happened 16,500 years when we asked others to look after us for us. It didn't work well, did it? So a human versus human problem is a human problem. The peace treaty is more, in effect, where the others, the other species, are not allowed to interfere with us anymore, and subsequently we're not allowed to interfere in their world either. But human to human problems, they're ours to fix. Now, there is some extenuating circumstances which was put in last week's show of an address to the council, because there is elements of psychopaths running off-world programs which they don't realise has already failed and doesn't exist anymore. But they're still harvesting, but the harvesting has nowhere to go. So, but we have to start working together, and this is largely what the Trust is doing, is getting people working together again. Have you heard anything about Donald Trump Jr. being indicted for false statements made to Congress? No, I haven't. I haven't had time to follow any of the theatre known as politics this week. Has there been a time when there was only love, no fear? The initial, as I understand it, I can't confirm it, but as I understand it, at the initial outset of this universe in particular, it was different. It was all light. It didn't perceive dark, so there was only love. And unfortunately, it got infected and invaded, and we've all seen the consequences here on this planet of what happens when the dark forces take over. But there has to be a balance in everything. Angels and demons, I believe it's one and the same being, just about how you are perceived. Cabal think they're all angels. They think they're doing the right thing. Draco think they're all angels. We don't. So it's about perception. We think they're demons. But there needs to be a healthier balance of, a drastic increase in love. Not just for your partner, but for all people on this planet. This is why this planet is in turmoil, because of a lack of it. Everything is run by fear and greed, not love and need. Is there a way to get the President to reverse the Communications Act? Well, people can get a petition up and ask. Yes, I imagine in sufficient numbers. I don't know the details of what the Communications Act is, so I can't really more comment on that. Can you elaborate on the concept of the creation of the new Earth? I understand that it exists on a separate frequency or timeline, and if we resonate with this frequency, we will somehow experience it. Do you believe that there'll be some sort of event which will trigger a merging of this reality for those who are ready, or will it simply be a gradual phasing in of this reality and phasing out of the old one? Well, at this time, the new Earth is progressing nicely, from what I know. We're not ready the planet is not ready for humans yet, from what I understand. I think we have to focus more on fixing the old Earth, the current one, before we drop a load of people to go and ruin and misuse and abuse the new one. We have to be a lot more spiritually aware and a lot more loving and caring on this planet before, in my opinion anyway, we have any migration. There may be circumstances where people will migrate. Maybe Monday's show will deliver more on that. Is there some kind of baseline frequency at our Operation Woodpecker coming through artificial lighting and electronics that assists in the perception of the veil? There is no more veil. It's gone. It's part of the magnetic field. Anything that creates a magnetic field is not really that good for us. And scientists are working on ways of how to correct that. As for artificial lighting, yes, I've heard a lot of them are not good. But again, once the old system goes down and there's more freedom of and the non-compete act, where only the giant corporations are allowed to operate in business, then a lot of new devices will come forward that will negate some of the more damaging aspects that we've got currently. But the veil is already gone. Don't care who tells you otherwise, it's gone. Do you know if placing orgonite in our home or carrying it on our body is beneficial to us? I don't know personally. A lot of people say it does. And if it works for you, fine. But make sure you clear before you set your own intention. This is the problem with a lot of crystals and these trinkets here and there. They're carrying or have the potential to carry dark energy, particularly the crystals, which then you absorb. But yes, a lot of people have said that orgonite works, and they'll know better than I. Wait for time. Couple of more, and then I've still got a load more to go. We'll have a music break then. When our cells are replicating after inception, where one cell completely disappears and two identical cells appear in its place, is this action also taking place when the cells in our body are going through the cyclical process of renewing throughout our lifespan? I'm not too sure on that, but the disappearing one goes to another plane and then comes back in. Essentially, does that not tell you you are operating in two worlds? But I don't know what happens. I imagine it's so, but I don't know the answer to the second part. I moved to Southern California about a year ago. I've heard you and others say that LA and San Diego cities are under domes. Last week I believe they became visible to me. Can you please explain more about these constructs? Who is responsible and what purpose do they serve? I never asked, funny enough, who built them. I imagine it was something to do with the Draco, but I'm not 100% sure on that. And it's to zone them off from certain conditions, and they can also use it as a frequency bouncer. They can bounce it off the bubble or the dome, so we can have a resonant effect that they choose. So if they bounce a frequency, and then it because it's in what is essentially a vacuum, it's reverberating at a higher frequency. They can also dictate weather where they don't get it. Now the only two places that I know is confirmed is Toronto and Antarctica. I don't know about the other ones. Is there a way to develop a separate banking trust association to define the quantum system in this association and then ask banks to join, hence accepting a new model of transactions for the benefit of the people globally? Well, as it stands, we've tried many things, but eventually, as it stands, everything has to go through the banks until we come up with a system that the public will accept, and we can work around them. So we'll then have to go through banks. Because the minute you go into banks, they're blocking everything. Anything to do with the people anyway. We have transferred funds and assets For those who say that the Manor World Holding Trust only has digital assets, now we have quite an extensive range of physical assets. And but banks, or the cartel of banks, and who runs them and who then decides if we place a transaction to, say, Citibank, and they ring the bank manager up, recognise where it's coming from, and tell that bank manager to not release those funds. There's not a lot we can do as it stands currently. We are working on it, working on many things, and eventually we will come up with a system that works around them, and they will collapse. So they will then have to come to us to stay in business. That's how it works, or that's how it will work. What do you know about Serco and SES? They're government services people, where essentially, and this happens in America and the UK, and Anna von Reitz, give her credit where credit's due, has kind of covered these far more extensively than I can about government services and these security groups like G4S and Citadel. Essentially, they run the government. So there's like 19 government services, and the government collects the money. Bear in mind, the government only gets 20%. This is America now. 20% of all taxes collected. The Rothschilds et al. Take the rest. And so then the American government is then always going to run short, and so then they have to borrow off the Federal Reserve, and it's 10% for every dollar. That applies to every other country, I might add, that uses dollars. When they purchase dollars, it's 10%. They're stripping every country, and that is also being worked on currently to stop that once and for all. Not stall it or block it, end it. And these government services people are all run by the same groups of clowns, and so it's pure folly blaming your government that this is not working, they haven't done this and they haven't done that, because it's all being ran by these private groups. What we're trying to do is build a platform for a real American government, where the government actually runs the country for and by the people, and not these private mercenary type public security services groups. And those are part of it. I heard you mention that the Pope wants to work with you guys to set things straight with humanity. Do you trust him? Anyone in a top position, we the people shouldn't trust fully, ever, until sufficient actions and a time has gone by where they've earned your trust. The same applies to Mr. Trump. If he was standing here now, I'd say the same thing. How can we the people trust a politician? We shouldn't do. They've not served us well. Now, if Mr. Trump does things over a period of time that is for and by the people and not for and by a faction, then the public will trust him and should do. But trust has to be earned. The Pope himself has also found out a lot about life and how things really work over the past months. His head's not not exactly still at the moment. His head's fairly spinning, as most of the people in the top organisations. They found out stuff they barely believed over the past 12 and 18 months, and they've had a difficult time getting their head around it. Welcome to our world. The implication in your narrative is that Source is a physical entity who created the first human. That is not correct. I've never ever said for Source or God, whatever you want to call it. Please don't call it the Lord, but that's Anu, the reptilian king. Source is not a physical entity. It just is. It's energy. Essentially, that's all we all are. A frequency. I've never said Source is a physical entity. Is there a difference between Source and God? Technically, no. Logistically, yes, because we've had a lot of gods, in inverted commas, who come to this planet representing themselves as a god, when actually they're not. They're just ordinary people with rather massively inflated egos. And this has been part of the problem here. And because we have disconnected, either by interference or by our own choice, from our remembrance of Source, that it's easier to replace it with something similar, but it's actually an illusion. So the term God is not really a good one, because we've had lots of them, but none of them are the real entity. I prefer Source rather than God. Can the 39 Earth-dwelling races be revealed at this time? No. Can you please share more details of the 39 non-human races that share this planet, their origin, and some details of their characteristics physically, culturally, and spiritually? Many are those invisible positions of power non-human. Are many of those invisible positions of power non-human? Not no more than that. Maybe one day, the ET side of things is put on a back burner. Now they're not interfering with us. We have to focus on what we're doing more than what they're doing. That wasn't the case before 2016. Since then, it is. And we really have to start focusing on how we fix our issues and drive this planet into a far better model of love, care and compassion and sharing than it is currently. Maybe then we will be better people to be able to go and meet these beings. At the moment, we can't even meet a person from a separate country without sneering or giving nasty remarks or calling them illegal or something else. So if we can't be nice to our own people, our own kind, how's it going to turn out meeting 39 others with a variety of differing shapes and frequent variants of, I won't say ugly, but they don't think we're particularly pleasing on the eye, but some of them are not exactly pleasant to look, but the many, what people look at, it's how people react to each other. You can overcome that variance in how we look, providing people connect in the right way. How I said this a while ago. you're walking down the streets, people say they all want to meet ETs. But if a Draco tapped you on the shoulder and you turn around as an 8-foot talking lizard, I don't think people are going to react too well. They're just not. Everyone's thinking, oh, the lovely little tiny grey, you can pat them on the head. Well, no, there's a lot of beings who don't like being touched and take great offence at it. So we have to learn parts of their culture. You can't bear hug them. And, some of them think we have a rather unpleasant smell. So you have to learn cultures. Well, that comes over time. So, final question before I go into a music break. I don't know whether we should continue with more because I've got too much to cover. I may have to throw them in another show. Apologies. Maybe this will be a good one to go in with. In your show last week, which was probably the week before now, you mentioned we as humanity can achieve huge things once our PSI fields are connected all together. Can we, the people who are already conscious about this, already connect our PSI fields? If yes, how can we do this? Answer: some of you already have. You've just not connected the dots. There's no handbook on this, manual, do this and do that. Like people ask me, how do you get to the mental planes? You develop the self. Service to others rather than service to self is a good start. Exhibiting more love than fear and anger is also a good start. But there's members in THR who have already connected the PSI field. And no, I'm not telling you which ones. Not fair.